Tonight I shall weave for you a tale of beauty and envy, of kindness and courage, and of the triumph of love over darkness. This is the story of Snow White, a maiden whose heart was as pure as the winter snow, and whose fate was shaped by both cruel treachery and the warmth of friendship. But beware, for this is no simple tale. In the shadows of its beauty lie dangerous secrets. A jealous queen with a heart colder than the iciest wind, and a forest alive with magic both dark and light. There are dwarfs whose hearts, though small, are mighty. A prince who sees not just with his eyes, but with his soul. And a magic mirror that speaks truths many would fear to hear. So sit close, for the winds outside may howl. But within these walls, you will journey to a world of enchanted woods and royal castles, where peril lurks, but hope always endures. Let us begin the tale of Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. In a faraway kingdom surrounded by towering mountains, lush valleys, and ancient forests, there lived a benevolent queen. She longed for a child to brighten the halls of her castle. One winter's day, as snow blanketed the land, the queen sat by her ebony-framed window, embroidering. A sudden prick from her needle caused 3 drops of blood to fall onto the snow. Struck by the contrast, she whispered, "If only I had a daughter, with skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony." Her wish was fulfilled when she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl named Snow White. The kingdom rejoiced, but their happiness was short-lived. The queen fell gravely ill and passed away, leaving the king and Snow White to grieve. In time, the king remarried, taking as his wife a woman of exceptional beauty. Yet her heart was as cold as the frozen rivers of winter. This new queen was as cruel as she was vain. She possessed a magical mirror that could speak the truth. Each day she would ask, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" For many years, the mirror replied, "You, O Queen, are the fairest of them all." This answer filled her with pride and assurance. Snow White grew into a kind and gentle girl, loved by all who met her. She had a natural grace and a heart that cared deeply for the people and creatures of the kingdom. As she reached her 16th year, her beauty surpassed even that of her stepmother. On her birthday, the queen stood before her mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" For the first time the mirror replied, "You, O Queen, are fair. It is true, but Snow White is fairer than you." The queen's jealousy flared into rage. "How dare she surpass me?" she hissed, pacing her chambers. Her obsession with being the most beautiful woman in the land consumed her, and she began plotting Snow White's demise. One morning, the queen summoned a huntsman, a loyal servant who had once served Snow White's father. She handed him a dagger with an ornate handle and commanded, "Take Snow White deep into the forest. Kill her and bring me her heart in this box as proof." The huntsman, though loyal, was deeply troubled. He knew Snow White's kindness and innocence and was horrified by the task. The next day, the huntsman led Snow White into the forest under the guise of a hunting trip. As they ventured deeper, the forest grew darker, its ancient trees towering overhead. Snow White, unaware of the huntsman's true intentions, marveled at the beauty of the wilderness, picking wildflowers and singing to the birds. When they reached a secluded glade, the huntsman drew his dagger, but his hands trembled. "Forgive me, princess," he choked, tears streaming down his face. "I cannot harm you. The queen ordered me to take your life, but I cannot obey her cruelty. Run, Snow White. Run as far as you can and never return to the castle." He released her and watched as she fled into the shadows. To deceive the queen, he killed a wild boar and placed its heart in the box. Snow White ran deeper into the forest, her fear and grief driving her forward. The once beautiful forest now seemed eerie and alive. Branches clawed at her dress, and the shadows seemed to whisper warnings. Despite her terror, Snow White pressed on until she could no longer run. Exhausted, she collapsed by a stream and sobbed. As dawn broke, the forest transformed into a place of beauty once more. Birds chirped, deer grazed nearby, and sunlight filtered through the leaves. Feeling renewed hope, Snow White continued her journey. Eventually, she came upon a clearing where a quaint little cottage stood. The house was small and charming, with a thatched roof and flowers blooming in window boxes. Snow White knocked on the door, but no one answered. Curiosity and exhaustion compelled her to enter. Inside, she found a cozy but cluttered home. Everything was small. The chairs, the table, and even the beds, which were lined up in a neat row. The kitchen sink was piled with dishes, and dust covered every surface. Who could live here? She wondered. Overcome by fatigue, she tidied the house before lying across 3 of the tiny beds and falling asleep. As evening fell, the 7 dwarfs returned from their day in the mines. They were skilled miners who spent their days unearthing precious gems from the mountains. Each dwarf had a distinct personality. Doc, the wise leader; Grumpy, the skeptic; Happy, the optimist; Sleepy, the yawner; Bashful, the shy one; Sneezy, the allergy-prone; and Dopey, who was lovable but silent. When they entered their home, they immediately noticed the changes. "Who's been cleaning?" Doc asked, examining the dust-free table. "And who's been eating our soup?" added Grumpy. They searched the house until they found Snow White asleep in their beds. Startled but curious, they gently woke her. Snow White explained her plight, and the dwarfs, moved by her story, offered her refuge. Snow White quickly became part of the dwarfs' lives. She brought warmth and joy to their home, cooking hearty meals, singing cheerful songs, and caring for them as they worked. In turn, the dwarfs grew fiercely protective of her, warning her never to open the door to strangers. Meanwhile, back at the castle, the queen consulted her mirror. When she learned that Snow White still lived, she was furious. "Her beauty will not outshine mine," she vowed, descending into her secret laboratory to concoct her wicked plans. Deep in the castle's hidden chambers, the queen began brewing dark magic. Her jealousy festered as she pored over ancient tomes and whispered incantations. For her first plot, she crafted a lethal device, a bodice lace enchanted to tighten uncontrollably. Disguising herself as a poor peddler woman, she set out for the dwarf's cottage. Arriving at the cottage, she found Snow White tending to the garden. Snow White, trusting and kind, greeted the old woman warmly. "Good day, dearie," the queen crooned, holding up the lace. "See these fine laces? Surely a young maiden like yourself would love to enhance her beauty with one of these." Snow White hesitated, recalling the dwarf's warnings, but the old woman's kindly demeanour disarmed her. "It's lovely," Snow White admitted, allowing the woman to lace her bodice. The queen tightened it slowly at first, then yanked hard, cutting off Snow White's breath. Snow White collapsed, lifeless. Satisfied, the queen fled, confident in her success. When the dwarfs returned home, they found Snow White on the ground. Alarmed, they loosened the bodice lace, and she gasped for air, awakening. She recounted the encounter, and the dwarfs scolded her gently. "Never speak to strangers, no matter how kind they seem," Doc warned. Upon hearing from her mirror that Snow White still lived, the queen seethed with rage. She devised a new plan and enchanted a comb to deliver poison upon contact. Once again, she disguised herself, this time as a frail old vendor selling trinkets. She returned to the cottage, this time finding Snow White sewing by the window. "Pretty combs for a pretty girl," the queen called out. Snow White shook her head. "I cannot buy anything, good lady. The dwarfs have forbidden me from speaking with strangers." The queen feigned disappointment. "Oh, but it is a gift, dear child. Surely no harm in accepting a token of beauty from an old woman." Snow White hesitated, then relented. The moment the comb touched her hair, she fell unconscious, poisoned. Once more the queen fled, believing her rival defeated. When the dwarfs came home, they discovered Snow White and removed the comb. She revived instantly and told them what had happened. This time then they were even sterner. "You must not open the door for anyone," Grumpy growled. Snow White promised to be more cautious. Determined to succeed, the queen turned to her most wicked creation, a poisoned apple. Its outer skin gleamed rosy red, concealing the deadly curse within. This time, no antidote would work unless someone truly loved Snow White and could break the spell. Confident, the queen transformed herself into an even older crone, her appearance so pitiful and unthreatening that no one could resist her. She approached the cottage once more. Snow White did not answer the door, recalling the dwarf's warnings. "My dear," called the crone, her voice trembling, "I am but a poor woman with an abundance of apples. Let me give you one as a token of goodwill." Snow White remained behind the window. "I cannot let anyone in," she said. "The dwarfs would be upset." The queen smiled cunningly. "Ah, but you needn't invite me in. Here, I'll leave it on the windowsill. Surely there's no harm in tasting a fresh apple, my dear. See? I'll take a bite first." She bit into the apple's unpoisoned side and smiled warmly. Snow White, charmed and trusting, took the fruit and thanked her. The moment she bit into the apple, its deadly magic took hold. Snow White's eyes fluttered shut, and she fell to the ground. The queen cackled with triumph, leaving Snow White lifeless. When the dwarfs returned, they found Snow White unresponsive. They wept and tried everything to revive her, but this time, no remedy worked. Heartbroken, they could not bear to bury her. Instead, they crafted a glass coffin adorned with gold, placing her in it so that her beauty could be seen forever. They kept vigil by her side, mourning the loss of their beloved friend. Snow White's legend spread across the land. Many came to see the beautiful maiden in the glass coffin, but none dared disturb her rest. One day, a prince from a neighbouring kingdom passed through the forest. Hearing of the maiden, he was moved by the tale and sought to see her for himself. When he arrived, he was struck by Snow White's beauty and felt a deep, inexplicable connection. "I must take her to my castle," he told the dwarfs. "She will be honoured and remembered forever." The dwarfs, though reluctant, saw the sincerity in the prince's eyes and agreed. As the prince's servants lifted the coffin, they stumbled slightly. The jolt dislodged the piece of poisoned apple from Snow White's throat. She gasped and opened her eyes. The dwarfs and the prince were overjoyed. Snow White, though disoriented, smiled at the sight of the prince. She quickly regained her strength and learned of the prince's devotion. Grateful and touched by his kindness, she accepted his proposal of marriage. News of Snow White's revival reached the Queen through her mirror. "Who is the fairest of them all?" she demanded, only to hear, "Snow White, who now reigns as Queen, is the fairest of them all." The Queen, blinded by fury, attempted to crash the wedding. However, she was recognized and captured. The Prince, Snow White, and the Dwarfs held her accountable for her crimes. Overwhelmed by her own dark magic and the hatred she had sown, the Queen met her end, consumed by the shadows she had unleashed. Snow White and the Prince ruled their kingdom with kindness and grace. The Dwarfs often visited the castle, where they were treated as family. Snow White's tale of resilience, love, and forgiveness spread far and wide, inspiring generations to come. And so, Snow White and her friends lived happily ever after